Hi, listeners. It's hard to believe, but New Frontiers in Functional Medicine has been going strong since 2015. With over 200 episodes and over 2 million listens, we are growing every year. My goal is to continue to bring you the best minds in functional medicine, epigenetics, and longevity. I want the content to be actionable for the functional medicine clinician and interesting for the rest of us. Thank you for supporting this podcast with your likes, with your honest reviews, with sharing the episodes with your friends and family. And if you haven't done so, please consider leaving a like or leaving us an honest review wherever you've accessed this podcast. Thank you, thank you, thank you to our sponsors. Because of our sponsors, these are companies that I trust, that we vet carefully, that we use in clinical practice, that I use personally. Because of them, everything associated with this podcast is free. If you haven't done so, I suggest you head over to drkfitzgerald.com to the podcast page where you can access the full transcript for every single one of these 200 episodes. And along with that transcript, you'll get an episode summary. You can get the research citations and additional content that is pertinent to the episode. I myself return to the transcript page all the time to pull out a little snippet of information that I want to recall or access a citation. Or better yet, sign up for our newsletter, again, at drkfitzgerald.com, and every single podcast episode will drop in your email as soon as it's released. Thanks again. Thank you to our diamond level sponsors, Biotics Research, Rupa Health, and Integrative Therapeutics. For over 40 years, the foundation of biotics research has been innovation and quality. Their goals remain unchanged: innovative ideas, carefully researched concepts, and product development with advanced analytical and manufacturing techniques. Biotics nutritional products are of superior quality and effectiveness. They're available exclusively to healthcare providers. Find them at bioticsresearch.com. I also want to give a shout out to our friends over at Rupa Health. They make lab testing easy, fabulous, doable for you, the clinician, and for you, the patient. Consider using Rupa as your super, super, super smart solution to all things laboratory testing. Visit them at rupahealth.com. For over 35 years, patients and clinicians have trusted Integrative Therapeutics for their dedication to quality, potency, and accuracy, and for bringing us exclusive products backed by science. From sourcing of premium raw materials to their meticulous manufacturing processes, they prioritize consistency, efficacy, and safety because our patients deserve nothing less. Find them at integrativepro.com. That's integrativepro.com. Thanks to our gold sponsors, Timeline and OneSkin. Timeline, fueling cellular energy for a lifetime of healthy aging. Find them at timelinenutrition.com. And OneSkin, skin age reversal technology. Find them at oneskin.co. Hi, everybody. Welcome to New Frontiers in Functional Medicine, where we are interviewing the best minds in functional medicine. And if you're with me at YouTube, you can see who I am sitting next to: the brilliant, very inspirational Dr. Terry Wahls. Let me give you her background, and we will jump right into the latest work that she's doing. Dr. Wahls is an Institute for Functional Medicine Certified Practitioner, and she's a clinical professor of medicine at the University of Iowa, where she conducts clinical trials. In 2018, she was awarded the Linus Pauling Award at IFM, and I upvoted that award for you, Terry, big time.
Oh, thank you, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. For her contributions in research, clinical care, and patient advocacy. She's also a patient, as you probably know, with secondary progressive multiple sclerosis, which confined her to a tilt-recline wheelchair for 4 years. She restored her health using a diet and lifestyle program she designed specifically for her brain, and now pedals her bike to work each day. This is incredibly inspirational and something that we've talked about on previous podcasts, and I will park all those podcasts so you can access them on the show notes page. And her backstory is interesting. So we go and check it out. It was her boss, actually, I think at the University of Iowa, who pushed her to research her transformation that he was observing. And it's, she continues to just really engage in extraordinary research, which we'll talk about in a second. She's got a bunch of books out, cookbooks. She's got the foundational Wahls Protocol. You're probably familiar with it. You're probably working with it in practice, as we are. And we're going to talk about the latest and greatest in her research and in, just how she's thinking about the state of the state with all things MS. Terry, once again, welcome to New Frontiers.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. It's always great to circle back and catch up and get to hang out with you. So we were going to talk about your research trial, which amazingly you've almost recruited a sufficient number of people, but I still want you to tell us about the research trial. But then I also want you to talk about the patient registry. Clinicians, refer your patients here. Patients, go to these sites. All right, go, Terry.
Okay, so the trial that we're doing will have 162 people in the study, comparing a time-restricted olive oil ketogenic diet, a modified paleo elimination diet to usual diet. People will come in, get randomized, they'll come back at 3 months, and they'll come back at 24 months. Now, what's really important is that they're also getting a MRI at baseline and at 24 months, in addition to the clinical exams, measures of walking, hand function, working memory, fatigue, quality of life, and mood. And we're collecting blood at month 0, 3, and 24, and we're collecting salivary microbiome at 0, month 3, and month 24. So this will be the largest, longest dietary intervention study that's been done to date. That will also include MRIs, and that will also include analysis of changes in the microbiome, changes in the metabolites or the metabolome. So in addition to seeing, can people sustain the diet, we'll see what happens on quality of life, patient-reported symptoms, clinical measures, and brain structure. And we'll see what happens with changes with the microbiome, changes with the metabolome. And then we'll be able to use artificial intelligence, machine learning, to look at, what can we learn about those changes and how they relate to the clinical outcomes and the patient-reported outcomes. So we're very excited. I think it'll be remarkable. It's also remarkable that we're able to get 161 people to agree to be randomized in basically just over a 2-year period. And so that means in 2026, we'll have completed all of our data collection. We'll be cleaning the data. And then in 2027, it'll be my postdocs I'll be sending around to present our study findings at the major multiple sclerosis research meetings, and then the major clinical and research meeting. And then I would anticipate that the manuscripts will be coming out in 2028. And there'll be many manuscripts that come out of this. Now, in addition, although, we're done, we will be done recruiting here in the next month. We've got everyone scheduled. We are therefore taking people who are interested in being in our trials to go to my patient registry. And the link for that is at terrywahls.com/trials. And for that, we can take people from all over the world because some of our clinical trials will be observational and will be virtual. So we could allow people to participate in those types of studies. For example, we did a really interesting study looking at urban versus rural in terms of access to food and what impact that has on their MS symptoms. We looked at breastfeeding and what what that experience looks like for women with MS. So we do a variety of observational stuff and some interventional stuff virtually. And we're writing grants. We're looking for doing some studies where we have virtual interventions related to exercise and dietary changes virtually. So if you're in the patient registry, that means we can contact you to say, okay, here's a new study that we're approved and we're recruiting. And so we're looking to add people with multiple sclerosis, with autoimmune conditions, with mental health conditions, with other chronic disease states to that patient registry. Because we have studies that I'm recruiting for with fibromyalgia, and with long COVID or post-acute sequela of COVID. So those studies are open, and we have some proposals related to virtual interventions for exercise and diet.
Awesome. Geez, awesome, Terry. I cannot believe all that you're up to. Wow. When we first started talking, when I first got to know you, I don't want to say it was, I think the greater medical community would have described your work as fringe. Obviously, when you were embraced by us immediately, and, given, I think, relatively early, you're the Linus Pauling Award, like, we recognized the extraordinary work that you were up to, but now you're being embraced, I think, perhaps begrudgingly by some, but the greater medical community is finally sitting up and paying attention. You're doing really solid science.
I tell my medical students and the postdocs that are in my lab that it takes about 30 years to change the standard of care. And so I'm 15 years into this journey. That means the early adopters are embracing my ideas. So of course, the functional medicine community, early adopters, that's embracing my community. And then when I go to the big international clinical meeting, it's called the Consortium of MS Centers, when I'm walking around there, people are stopping me saying, Dr. Wahls? And then they whip out their phone and they're asking, like, could I get a photo with you? My patients would really appreciate that. So I'm stopping and saying, yeah, of course. And so we have a quick conversation, get some photographs. And more of the PhDs are now also stopping me saying, Dr. Wahls. And then when I've been going to some of the basic science lectures at the consortium meeting, this was really quite delightful. The last lecture that I attended was about the diet impact on the microbiome. And the very last person was talking about clinical trials. And she was saying that, the patients are ahead of us. They're reading the books, they're changing their diet. The majority of patients with MS, in fact, are changing their diet. And she had the slide with and here are the 4 most popular books. So of course, the Wahls Protocol was one of those 4 books. And she was talking about doing a qualitative investigation of what patients who are changing their diet, what they're telling them. So that was awesome. Super interesting. Then I went up and introduced myself. Afterwards, we had a lovely conversation, exchanged contact information, and are talking about ways to collaborate.
Good for you.
It is, it's happening. Our work is cited, more and more. And, we still have another 15 years. Will I be like Barry Marshall and get the Nobel Prize in Medicine? Who knows? But clearly more and more of the neurologists and specialists are agreeing that diet and lifestyle matter. And here at the university, more of my conventional colleagues are talking to the patients that, yes, diet and lifestyle matters. And more of them, in fact, are sending people to go out and get my book. So it is happening.
It just makes me so proud. I'm just so thrilled, and we'll support you and your work. It's just incredible. But I want to give a shout out also, and then I have a ton of questions. We got to get down to business here. But I want to give a shout out also to your boss, the director, who pushed you to do this.
Yeah, that was Paul Rothman. So he was a rheumatologist, and he, of course, had seen me go from athletic to wheelchair dependent, clearly getting worse and worse.
Yeah.
And his first direction was get a case report written up. Then when I did that, he said, now get a safety and feasibility study going. And I said, well, I don't have any training in human clinical trials. He said, I'll get you the mentors. I think this is really important, Terry. We need to see, could others with progressive MS implement this complicated regimen that you did? And then what happens? And the first time, so we wrote up the protocol, and it was denied. It was disapproved by the IRB. Paul called the chair of the IRB and said, I really want this to happen. We'll get the mentors for her on her team to address all of the concerns that you identified, because we want it to be safe, but we need to help her figure out how to make this happen. So he got me people who are still on my study team and who taught me how to do clinical trials. And we ended up, doing, I think we're up to our 10th clinical trial. It's super exciting, super fun. It ruins my sleep because I'm so excited about what I'm doing. I have to really work at meditating, getting myself to calm down and let go, so I can fall asleep at night.
But you're being bathed in, in all of the good energy of such deep inspiration. Well, God.
So it was my chair at the university, Paul Rothman, and then my chief of staff at the VA, who originally was a guy who assigned me to the traumatic brain injury clinic for a job that I couldn't possibly do physically, because he was trying to force my hand into medical retirement. But John ultimately became a huge fan and supported giving me protected time to do my research. So John and Paul, talked to each other and agreed that it was really important to investigate this, and were instrumental in getting that very first 2 studies going.
Incredible. And because they were witnessing you, they were
They
witnessing
saw the
you
transformation.
get out of the wheelchair. More than that, get back on your bike.
Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah. Well, I just, if you are awarded the Nobel at some point in your career,
well, you'll have to come.
Yeah, for sure. But you're standing on the shoulders of these people who displayed a lot of courage and pushed you out of your comfort zone. And and I have gratitude. I personally have gratitude to both of them for that courage. Okay, so you've got this new study and you've got 2 different dietary patterns that you're looking at that we use in clinical practice quite a bit, the paleo elimination, and then this olive oil leaning keto. These diets are certainly overlapping. I want to understand what's similar, but also what's different, why you're using them, and what you expect to see. What's your hypothesis around employing both?
So if you look at the network meta-analysis that Dr. Snetzler did, she looked at the published dietary intervention studies as of 2021. There were 12 studies, 8 diets, paleo, Mediterranean, low fat, ketogenic, anti-inflammation, fasting, calorie restriction, and usual diet. And the 3 diets that were effective for fatigue were paleo, Mediterranean, low fat, and there were only 2 diets effective for quality of life, and that was paleo and Mediterranean. And the paleo was like 50% better, the most effective for fatigue, and twice as effective for quality of life. Keto, in the other diets, the 95% confidence interval flops over the midpoint, favoring the control, which is why that's not listed. However, the keto diet does reduce mood, reduce fatigue, improve quality of life with a large effect size, but the 95% confidence interval is so great. Now, part of what I think can be a reason that the keto diet doesn't do quite as well is the traditional keto diet leans really heavily on eggs and heavily on dairy.
Yes.
And so we can do better. Now, In our ketogenic diet, I did not take dairy or eggs out because the keto diet is really tough for people to implement. So yes, we left those in, but I made them optional. And I stressed olive oil as opposed to dairy fat, so that it was a much more heart healthy version of the ketogenic diet. And we made clear that dairy and eggs are optional. You do not have to have them if you don't want.
So you might have a sub cohort who is adhering to a dairy. You might
Well,
get some data in there. Are you
will we be able
hoping?
to
Or-
have that data? We probably won't do a sub-analysis on that. But we certainly tell people that dairy and eggs are not a requirement.
Are you going to do food frequency? So you might be able to
Yes,
see.
we have a comprehensive food frequency at month 0, month 12, and month 24. And we also do another questionnaire at the end to know, we ask, what were you eating before the study began? Was there a diet that you reported following? Because we know the majority of folks on a neuroimmune problem have changed their diet. So we want to know, what diet were they following? How long had they been following it? And did they, if they were, particularly if they're in the usual diet group, what diet were they electing to follow? Because they aren't going to be following the standard American diet. If people come to a dietary intervention study, it's because they're open to changing their diet. They're open to improving their diet.
Right.
And we give them every month tips from the dietary guidelines for Americans on how to improve their diet. So I fully anticipate all three groups will improve. I don't know that people in the usual diet group will be adherent to the dietary guidelines. We'll be doing food frequency questionnaires, so we will be able to answer that question. Did they follow the dietary guidelines or not? I know many of those folks may have already adopted the Mediterranean diet or a keto diet or doing intermittent fasting, or they may have.
And this muddies the water, but yeah, go ahead.
Yes, it absolutely muddies the water. And that is the nature of doing dietary intervention studies. The control group is always muddy because people who are willing to be in a diet intervention are willing to do a diet study because I've made the decision I'm going to improve my diet. So they can, at the very least, look at the consent and say, well, here's what the intervention diet looks like. I want to be in the intervention. Well, so I'm going to follow the intervention diet on my own.
Right. Well, let me ask you, I mean, just thinking about some of the work that we've done, we run groups and we do our methylation diet and lifestyle intervention. And, we're looking at biological age, seeing if we've tweaked it. And recently we had a cohort where some people actually, we saw, just looking at the lab data, we saw, minimal response, or some people we're using the pace of aging now. So maybe there was an uptick in certain individuals. And I was probing, I had a group of people I was dialoguing with on their baseline and their follow-up labs. And, people are coming to us now having already been on the methylation diet and lifestyle for a while. So we're just looking at a cohort who's already adopted this, and you're going to be doing the same thing.
We'll have the same thing.
And so
absolutely.
how do you work with that?
And this will make it, will continue to be an issue for everyone doing dietary studies in MS.
Yeah.
As more of the practicing neurologists learn and agree, diet matters, and they're telling their patients, diet matters, and you'll greatly benefit from improving your diet, whether it's a low-fat diet, a Mediterranean diet, intermittent fasting, the Wahls diet, keto diet, but work on fixing your diet.
There are going to be, some of your people are going to have, quality of life measures or baseline MRIs that are already evolved because they've already adopted a better eating pattern.
Yes.
And so, I mean, but if you do, you're going to have that baseline food frequency questionnaire. So you're also going to be able to tease those people out.
Well, we'll know what they're eating at their baseline.
Yeah.
And we also know from MRI data, the trajectory of volume loss that typically occurs.
Right.
Which is 0.7 to 0.9% volume loss per year. Now, healthy rates of volume loss is 0.3% per year. So if what we show is that the 2 intervention arms get 2.3% per year, that is huge.
Mhm.
That's huge. We've got them to healthy rates of brain volume aging, which
Yeah.
predicts that we have decreased the probability of future nursing home care, assisted living, job loss. Let's say the 2 intervention arms are at 0.3, 0.3. The usual diet arm is at 0.5. And that statistically, there's not a difference between the two, but this is still remarkably better than what we see in the placebo arm of drug studies for MS.
Got it. So you're going to have a population that you can look at who's probably really or more likely consuming a more standard
So
dietary plan.
that's the beauty of having the MRIs.
Yeah.
So, and that's one of our secondary outcomes is what happens to brain volume loss? Can we get people to healthy rates of aging? And what percentage of people got to healthy rates of aging compared to what we see in the placebo arms of drug trials?
Awesome. Awesome. So are you have access? Will you be able to collaborate with some of those scientists? Like, will they make their data available, or are you going to glean this just from their publications? Or
We'll take it from their publications.
this is going to be extremely interesting.
So that will be super interesting. The cognitive issues will be super interesting. I certainly expect in most studies, the first thing that improves is fatigue and quality of life. Motor changes take about 9 months. Walking takes about 9 months. But we're following people for 2 years.
Yeah.
So it'll be super interesting to see what happens to walking.
Yeah.
And even in our era of highly potent DMTs, where you can do a great job of stopping the relapses, of stopping the new enhancing lesions, we're still having brain volume loss of 0.9% per year, which is why there's cognitive decline, nursing home care, frailty.
Following standard of care, following DMT
following standard of care,
disease modifying
and so I mean it's super important to stop the enhancing lesions, to stop the relapses, and for many that does require a DMT. You may not need to take the DMT indefinitely. Slowly, my colleagues are beginning to realize that the DMT is not enough, that we have to be talking to people about diet. We need to be talking with them about sleep. We need to be talking with them about exercise and the stress management program.
Because the pathophysiology, I mean, the disease progression is still happening, even if they've cut
That's right.
a couple
There's
arms
the
off the disease. Yeah.
inflammation, which the drugs do a nice job of turning off, but they don't do a good job of turning off the degeneration. And of course, you and I are not surprised, because that has to do with mitochondria, it has to do with toxins, it has to do with sleep, it has to do with diet quality. And that's where all these environmental factors that we address in the functional medicine matrix are so impactful.
Yeah, you can't shut down a single pathway and expect eureka, as a drug model does. That's right. You have to practice systems. You have to take a systems approach. This is going to be incredibly interesting. It's so ridiculously interesting to explore your baseline people coming in and where they are in their health, as compared to the control group over in the drug trials. It's going to be incredible to see if you could take these people at a higher baseline and move them along further. And it's just incredible that you'll have this MRI data and that you're going to be employing AI. I mean,
We'll have AI,
Yeah.
and we'll have microbiome data, and we'll have metabolite data for the baseline and 3-month visit across 2 studies. Across the first study that compared the low saturated fat or SWANK diet and the modified paleo elimination diet or the Wahls diet. And then we have the data from the efficacy of diet and quality of life comparing keto, paleo, and usual diet. So we'll have a robust amount of data to go look at.
And the AI lens, I have become a huge fan as I learn more and actually I'm starting to develop my own, body of experience in my own patient population, looking at brain MRIs through the AI lens. And it's extraordinary, the level of information, the granular, profound, foundational information. It's just so much, it's blown up. And so I'll look forward to seeing what you guys learn. It's just very exciting where we are right now. As we go deeper into the world of longevity science, I want to introduce you to a company rewriting the rules of skincare. Founded by 4 PhDs in skin science, OneSkin has developed a peptide scientifically proven to address cellular aging. By targeting senescent cells, their OS01 peptide helps skin look, feel, and behave younger, visibly reducing lines and wrinkles and improving skin's texture and overall appearance. To learn more about their groundbreaking approach, visit oneskin.co. That's ONESKIN.co.
Healthcare providers have trusted Dutch for years to discover the root cause of hormone-related issues with actionable results backed by peer-reviewed and validated research. New research in the November edition of the journal Menopause now shows that dried urine testing is also effective for monitoring hormone replacement therapy. This exciting new study is one of the many validated papers Dutch relies on to help providers navigate tough treatment decisions with confidence. Learn more about Dutch testing and our commitment to following the science at dutchtest.com/research.
All right, so we were talking about the oral microbiome. I was excited to hear that you were taking salivary specimen in particular versus stool. I mean, I think both are great, but to your point, it's easier taking saliva. Let me throw a couple thoughts out, and then I'm going to turn it over and listen. Yeah. One is 2 thoughts that we were talking about is I have started to use the oral microbiome. I'm doing oral microbiome testing routinely now in my clinic and have come to deeply appreciate the kind of information we're getting there, because we can have what we think is incredibly healthy oral hygiene habits, and we can go to our dentist and have like pretty decent pockets and no sign of disease, but we are still harboring disease organisms that can prompt systemic disease, including MS, including, influencing neurodegeneration, not to mention cardiovascular disease, autoimmunity such as RA and so forth. So that can be happening. So that's one question I wanted you to, I wanted to hear from you, and I want to get your thoughts more broadly on the oral microbiome. But the other piece is that you and I were talking about, why there's a broad number, these dietary patterns that you're looking at and seeing efficacy around run the gamut from, full tilt keto diet to, kind of modified vegan. Actually, we were talking about the Ornish, just published Ornish cognitive impairment study, which is really extraordinary, looking at his vegan approach, the Ornish diet, and then putting that against Bredesen or Heather Sandison's work in dementia, where they're employing a ketogenic diet. So we're seeing these wildly different dietary patterns have extraordinary outcome. And your thought immediately to me was that, it's the microbiome, and that you're going to actually be able to provide information there. So throwing the ball over to you, talk about all of that, Cherry.
Well, let's sort of think about our evolutionary history. We start out in equatorial Africa. We migrate north to Europe, have a 100,000-year war with the Neanderthals. We finally assimilate them, then get into Europe, the Middle East, Asia, Australia. the Pacific Islands, North America, South America. Humans, we're omnivores. We can eat a wide variety of diets and a wide variety of foodstuffs. So first thing I want to make very clear is that anyone who says there is one diet, my diet, they're wrong. Our evolutionary history makes it very clear. We can eat a wide variety of foods. And we have a few societies that are carnivore, eat, meat, blood, milk, and that's it. And they thrive, have reproductive success. Most of the evolutionary diet patterns have 80 grams of carbs or less, and a wide variety of plants and a wide variety of animal products. And that might be 80 grams, 50 grams, 30 grams, 20 grams, or the rare carnivore at 0 grams. But we have very different foods. The thing that's common is we eat what's seasonally available, and it fluctuates. And for most of our societies, there are 200 plus plants that you're exposed to over the season. Therefore, we should not be at all surprised that we have studies saying keto works. We have studies saying Mediterranean works. We have studies saying, that Dean Ornish's vegan works, although I'll say Dean Ornish surely has to supplement, because there are no vegan societies from an evolutionary standpoint. All those societies are relatively recent and require supplements in order to be successful. But if spiritually
Like
that's
such as
important to you,
B12,
it
for
certainly
example.
can be done.
Mhm.
And if we want to take someone who is ill, who wants to come in and say, I need to recover from my chronic health problem, there will be a time where we could have them give us some saliva. So we could do genetics and a microbiome. We could get blood to get nutrient markers and metabolites, urine to get more nutrient markers, metabolites, and send it off to the lab. It'd probably take a couple months to get their report. They'll come back, and there'll be nutrient deficiencies that we should address. However, would be optimal given that circumstance. And then I'd probably have a report based on their microbiome that would tell me which diet and their genetics, which dietary patterns that they would be most likely to do really well with. And I might even be able to rank order most effective to lesser effective, and which dietary patterns would be not helpful or may make them worse. And that there may be people who would do really well on a Dean Ornish's supplemented vegan diet. And there may be a very different cohort that's going to do really well on the Mediterranean diet or the Paleo diet or the ketogenic diet.
Yeah.
And then the next question will be, what diet would appeal to you and your family?
Mhm.
Because it has to be something that's actionable that the patient and the family can embrace together. So my report might say, yep, the Wahls diet is definitely the best one. But if they're like, I can't eat meat, spiritually, I just can't do that. Well, then we're going to go and say, okay, now what can we do to make that work? Or we might say that, yes, the Wahls diet's the best one, but you have type 2 diabetes and you are 100 pounds overweight. So maybe a ketogenic diet, and the person is fired up about wanting to do a ketogenic diet because their cousin had done really, really well on a ketogenic diet. And so we have to think about what they're excited about and what the family is excited about. And so this is a negotiation based on their evaluation. What are recommendations? And then we have to listen and say, okay, how does that sound to you? And what are your thoughts about this?
I have a couple questions. First of all, that makes total sense to me. And there's overlap between, say, a keto and doing a Wahls. So you can pull those Wahls principles into keto. We used to do that in our clinical practice, or we still do it. We'll prescribe a keto leaning Wahls or whatever, and you can, and that's definitely doable if you're working with a decent nutritionist. And so that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm also wondering about just duration of these dietary patterns. A very aggressive keto, and actually this will jump into another thought that I have. I want to hear your thoughts around, a really aggressive keto may not be sustainable and may not be appropriate to sustain it for the long haul, or it may be. And so I'm curious about that. Vegan, I mean, just thinking about the Ornish protocol and, maybe that, it's particularly given the fact that there's built-in nutrient insufficiencies, unless you're supplementing. I'm just like, what, go ahead.
I think whatever your plan is, you want to follow your patient. And so my preference clinically is, we start out, and depending on how ill the person is, I might see them more frequently, or at the very least see them every 3 months, and assess their response and make adjustments. Certainly, even people who are very enthusiastic about keto, I want to keep monitoring their lipids very closely. Whatever diet plan you use, whether it is Dean Ornish's vegan approach, we need to monitor them closely, because as their nutrients improve, any prescription medications that they're taking, the needs for that prescription medication is going to adjust. So you don't want them to become hypotensive. You don't want them to become hypoglycemic. And then if they're on a mood stabilizer, and so now their mood is improving because you have improved their diet, you have to be careful they don't become hypomanic or manic.
How are you addressing this in your study?
Well, we have to follow them. And we certainly notify their primary care team. There's also a symptoms questionnaire that we are following every 3 months.
Okay. So you'll be picking up on these, and you'll just have them.
And yes, we alert the primary care team. We alert the neurologist that as their diet improves, their prescription medication needs may change.
That's absolutely correct. I mean, we see it all the time, but in clinic, you're really paying, you got somebody under a microscope basically. And in the research setting, you need to take that into consideration. That's important. So certainly there are companies out there touting that they have data to prescribe the perfect dietary pattern for an individual these days. I mean, we certainly, we have clues in functional medicine for sure. But I have not found anything that I would say is highly reliable right now. I'm curious your thoughts, because when we were talking earlier, I was excited about your idea. You're doing these microbiome.
Well, we don't know that yet.
Right.
So the people who think I can do it based on your genetics, that's leaving out the microbiome and what your nutrient levels are right now. Will there be a time?
What about the people who are making certain claims regarding the microbiome?
I'm surprised the FDA is not coming back.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful what claims you can make.
Mm-hmm. So you just don't think we're there yet, scientifically?
I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah, but you're hopeful.
Will we be able to be someday? Perhaps, although the FDA will be very concerned about making claims. But will there be a time where we can talk about, based on your microbiome, your nutrients, your genetics, these are the diets that we think you would do most effectively with, and these are the diets that you'd be least effective with, and it'll be super interesting to see. Because the FDA is, very concerned that we not overpromise beyond what has been validated with the literature. what the FDA will allow.
It's exciting for me to pay attention to this. I mean, anybody working with patients will, see certain dietary patterns that seem to be beneficial, but there's always outliers. There's always people who do very well with a different macronutrient structure, who need, access to certain carbs, and somebody else, doesn't. I mean, we see this time and again.
I mean, that's why I think it's important when you're seeing a patient that you have this conversation, based on your clinical judgment, what you think will be the best dietary pattern for them. And then you have the conversation, which patterns they think they and their family can get behind. And you pick one and you start. Then you have to watch that you picked the right one for them and they're feeling great and things are doing well, or the one you picked, but their cholesterol is really suddenly now is 330. Well, that's not going to work. You don't want to keep them on that. Or the cholesterol now is 150. Well, so I'm nervous about that. I think that's too low and that's going to create some problems. And so you'll still want to have the close follow-up to know how people are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. We're leaning more and more on imaging. I think clearly, the new technology, again, through an AI lens, analyzing plaque, we can, and calcified plaque and soft plaque, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I think we can nail down who those hyper responders, those people for whom cholesterol really goes a little wonky. We can do a little bit of a drill down in clinical practice to kind of determine our index of concern with those. But I will say that I am not prescribing coconut oil in the same way that I once was. Are you using coconut oil?
No, I'd much rather use olive oil.
Yeah, that makes sense. What else do I want to say? Well, I want to hear from you if you have any other thoughts on the dietary patterns that we're talking about. But I also, you're paying attention for yourself again, as somebody who is continuing to, address MS in yourself. You're trying new interventions, you're trying new treatments, supplements, et cetera, all the time. I mean, you've really got your finger on the pulse of what's happening in the community. So I'm curious about those, all of it, from supplements to drugs that are coming down the pike that you might have your eye towards with some sort of optimistic look. What about, and some of the radical treatments that we're using more in the so-called sort of longevity biohacking space? Therapeutic plasma exchange, actually, I've seen wonders in some of my autoimmune. And then stem cells, exosome, like the whole lot. What are you thinking about?
So in the biohacking longevity space, super interesting stuff that's going on. There's certainly a lot of excitement that plasma exchange and the removal of these proteins that are associated with accelerated aging leads to regression of symptoms, regression of disability, improvement of mental clarity, improvement of vision. And so this is certainly a very useful technology. And our billionaire folks going to get their plasma exchanges on a regular basis to stay young forever? Oh, I bet many of them are, absolutely. And they're the folks who are funding a lot of the longevity research. And then in terms of stem cells, we know that after the age of 40, our stem cell populations decline. And if we have a standard American diet, high in sugar, high in flour-based products, stem cells decline more rapidly. If we are sedentary, stem cells decline more rapidly. If we're not exercising, if we're not doing strength training, stem cells decline more rapidly. So yes, you could take stem cells. You could also do a variety of lifestyle things to boost your stem cells: fasting, the fast American diet, strength training, high intensity interval training, cold plunges, saunas, So all of those things can be very helpful. Would taking stem cells or exosomes also be further help? Probably yes.
Okay. Supplements or drug trials that you're paying attention to?
Well, the supplements, I'm thinking about what we can do for our mitochondria. There's a lot of excitement about spermidine, which is from wheat germ. So that's not a compound that I'm going to consume, although your gut will make spermidine if you're having a lot of sauerkraut and legumes. Another compound that can be very helpful, urolithin A, that your gut will make if you have the correct enzymes, the correct microbiome, and you're consuming pomegranates. Or you could take urolithin A commercially, as in MitoPure. And that turns out to be even more effective with mitophagy than spermidine. And then there's the variety of senolytic compounds that can help take the cells that have begun to undergo senescence and are sort of stuck in that zombie phase that are creating misfolded proteins and accelerating aging. And so there are a variety of senolytic products that can help take out those senescent cells. And you take those senolytics once a month. That may be very helpful.
Okay. All right. And we actually have a blog on spermidine. We'll just pop on our show notes as well if anybody wants to read a little bit about it. What about some of there's a lot of people in the longevity space using rapamycin. Is that something that you would consider in your population? I
have not looked at the rapamycin literature, so I really can't speak to that intelligently.
Yeah, and it's just starting to emerge, human data. It's a long time it's been in the animal space, but I think there are human clinical trials and so forth happening. What else do I want to ask you? This has been drugs. I mean, any drugs you think are worth thinking about? Yeah.
There are, I think over 20, maybe 24 different approved drugs that reduce the number of new enhancing lesions for people with MS. And so basically there are about 20 different disease-modifying treatments for a wide variety of autoimmune conditions. And they are very effective at reducing new enhancing lesions, and that's how you get your FDA approval. Then they are also reducing the number of new relapses, with the goal being no new enhancing lesions, no relapses. And then the debate is, how long should you stay on these drugs, and at what age should you come off? In the functional medicine space, our debate is, how long do you have to have no new lesions, no relapses, and then I could begin to transition you to a less potent drug and maybe off drugs with appropriate close monitoring. And there's a company that I really like a lot, Octave, that has a test called the Multiple Sclerosis Disease Activity Test that looks at 18 proteins, and then they use AI to analyze the proteins, and you get scores with microglia, myelin biology, inflammation, and degeneration. In that, and you'll get a score, low, medium, high. And if you're low in all four areas, then I'm going to feel pretty good about that your disease is quiet, and I could consider moving you to a less potent disease-modifying drug, or potentially off your disease-modifying drug and continue to follow you. And this is important because over the age of, and we don't know, 50, 55, 60, the risk of the disease-modifying treatments is going up and the benefits going down. because now the risk of increased risk of cancer and infections, is climbing, and the benefit, because you're not going to be getting new enhancing lesions as you're older, is declining. So that Octave test, super helpful for people who are contemplating coming off the DMTs, how to do that safely, how to monitor safely, because you'd like to know before I have a new enhancing lesion and my brain's being damaged, that my disease activity scores are all low.
Yes. And this is a blood specimen?
This is a blood specimen. Yeah, I'm very excited about that.
Wow. Yeah, I'm this is the first I'm hearing about it. We'll link to it, and that will be part of my own exploration. Would you use this sort of off label, or is it very specific MS? Would you use this
Well,
in neurodegeneration more broadly?
They use it for MS, they use it for Parkinson's, and they use it for Alzheimer's. And so they have AI that gives people scores for the MS patient, for the Parkinson's patients, and for the Alzheimer's patients.
Would it be something that you might consider as a preventative investigation?
For healthy aging, I don't know that they have that data. And I'm having conversations with them. We keep writing grants because I want to do a stopping study. That what I'd like to do is have people come in who are over 55, who are on a DMT, that we could put on basically the Wahls Protocol, diet and lifestyle, for 3 months, then randomize half to stay on their DMT and half to go off, and follow them for 18 months and see how they do. And that we would get a Octave test at baseline at 3 months, then at the end of the study at 18 months, and probably every 3 to 6 months in the study, so we could see what's happening not only with the MRI, but with disease activity as measured by these proteomics.
Interesting. And then, so they're starting the trial on the DMT, and then would you taper them off?
That's how we write the grant. So far, we've not been able to get funding.
Okay.
So we're going to try. We keep trying. Ever the optimist. We keep writing our grants. I'm hopeful that we will eventually get that kind of study funded.
Nice. That's great, Terry. I have done more questions for you. Let me ask you 2 more, and then we're going to stop. We're kind of heading over time. I neglected to ask you in the time-restricted olive oil keto arm, what's your time-restricted, what's that window? And then I want you to
It's a 6 to 8 hour eating window.
It's a 6 to 8 hour, which is pretty restricted. So that just jumps right on to my next question to you. And what do you anticipate to see for adherence over the long haul?
Well, we do have measures of adherence, and what we've been able to find in our previous studies, adherence is actually really quite high.
Well,
if people perceive that their symptoms are reduced with the intervention, and symptoms worsen when they don't adhere, you'll have great adherence. If they cannot perceive any difference between their symptoms when they adhere or don't adhere to the diet, the adherence steadily declines. And so it will be super interesting for us to tell. In our WAVE study, I think our adherence rate 80%. In our study comparing diet and lifestyle in people who had declined drug therapy to people who were taking conventional therapy and doing drugs, we had self-reported diet adherence of 95%, exercise adherence of 90%, and meditation adherence of 70%. And that was based on the app that we had people completing every day, and on survey data at the end.
that's great. That is so terrific. We saw the same thing. We saw high adherence in our methylation diet and lifestyle because people were very excited about continue to be looking at BioAge. But I want to say also reflecting what you found, meditation was the intervention most poorly adhered to of all of them, although still not bad.
And for people to adhere to an intervention long term, it really works if they can link, I feel better doing this this intervention, I feel worse if I'm not doing the intervention. If they can't make that linkage, the intervention tends to extinguish over time.
Yeah, and we've been working with healthy cohorts, but our intervention is much shorter. It's only 8 weeks. I would imagine we might see that change, that fall off, because they're starting baseline healthy. And yeah, to your point, they're feeling better, so they're adhering. That it's very interesting.
That's part of what we teach.
Mhm.
I use the Wahls behavior change model, which we go through teaching people how to monitor their biomarkers, how to identify their facilitators, their barriers, and to create the environments to maximize success.
Will you be using that app with this group?
Well, we have we do have a number of apps in the efficacy of diet and quality of life that people are using. Yes.
And are they going to have access to coaches? Will they have
What was that?
will they have access to coaches? I mean, are they going to have more?
No.
They're not.
So the intervention arms do have a monthly support call, and they have the opportunity to submit questions that I answer in a video that's hosted to the group. The usual care arm still gets a monthly message from me, and both arms, so all 3 arms have a diet specific app for them. So they all get a monthly touch point to help them be more successful with the group to which they are assigned.
Okay. I think that's, in my observation in our work, that's been pretty essential, in our success. Having some touch points. Anyway, Terry, just keep up the amazing work you're doing. It's always a pleasure to get to hang out with you, even if it's in the virtual space.
So
Thanks.
let me remind everyone, have your patients go to terrywahls.com/trials and register to be part of our patient registry so they could be part of our future studies.
Thanks again. Thanks for joining me today. As always, thank you for listening to New Frontiers in Functional Medicine, where our sponsors help bring the very best minds in functional medicine. And of course, today is no exception. Not everybody can be a sponsor on my platform. I appreciate the good work, the relentless research, and the generous support from my friends at Rupa Health, Biotics, Integrative Therapeutics, Timeline, and OneSkin. These are brands I know and trust and use in my clinic and can confidently recommend to you. Please visit them online and let them know you learned about them on New Frontiers. And if it's not too much to ask, consider leaving a thumbs up and a kind review wherever you're listening to New Frontiers. Thanks.